This is standard number 64, factoring trinomials where a is 1. Okay, so this is going to be the backwards of multiplying binomials. So previously we've gone from something that looks like this, so x plus 3 times x plus 4, and we multiplied it out to get something like x squared plus 7x plus 12. Okay, but in this standard we're going to go backwards. So we're going to start with something like that looks like this and go back to a binomial times a binomial. Okay, and we're going to use the general form ax squared plus bx plus c for our quadratic expressions. Okay, so we are going to factor this x squared plus 9x plus 20. Remember, we want it to look like a binomial times a binomial. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to figure out, so again, we're using the general form ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so this is all where a is 1. So in front of this, x squared is really a 1 that we don't have to write there. Okay, so I need to figure out what is going to multiply. So I'm going to multiply to give me my c, so my 20. Okay, and then what adds to give me my b, so this 9 that's in the middle. Okay, so I want to think of two numbers that are going to multiply to give me 20 and add to give me 9. So if you think of your factors of 20, so numbers that multiply to give you 20, we have 1 and 20, 2 and 10. So if we think about 1 plus 20 is not going to give us 9, 2 plus 10, that's not going to give us 9. Okay, so some other factors of 20 would be 5 and 4. Okay, so then 5 and 4 does multiply to give us 9, so those are our two factors that work. So I am now going to break up this middle term, my b term, with this 5 and 4 that I found out that works. Okay, so I would have x squared plus 5x plus 4x plus 20. Okay, we can do this because these middle terms, 5x plus 4x, if I added those back together, it would give me 9x. So we're just breaking that 9x up. Okay, so now we're going to use the box method, just like we did with multiplying, but we're going to go backwards. Okay, so I'm going to draw my box. Okay, inside of my box, I'm going to put each of my terms on the inside instead of the outside. So I would have x squared, I would have my 5x, 4x, and 20. Okay, so now I need to factor out my greatest common factor, just like we have been doing in the past few standards. So I want to look to figure out what's going to go over here. I want to think about what my greatest common factor between x squared and 5x. Okay, so this is like a 1x squared. So between 1 and 5, I could just pull out a 1. Okay, so we can write that 1 there if we want. And then between x squared and x, they each share 1x. Okay, I'm just going to start writing just x instead of putting that 1 in front of it. Okay, and then over here I want to figure out what my greatest common factor between 4x and 20 would be. So my greatest common factor for those would just be 4. Okay, and then I need to figure out what to write on the top of my box. So my greatest common factor between x squared and 4x, again, I can just pull 1 out of those and then an x. Okay, and then between these two boxes here, 5x and 20, my greatest common factor would be 5. Okay, so now on the outside I have my factors, and I just need to write this in factored form. So factored form is going to look like this: x plus 4 times x plus 5. Okay, so this is going to be our answer here. It doesn't matter which one we write first. We could have written x plus 5 first times x plus 4. All right, let's look at another example. Okay, so same thing. We just use this x to help us organize our information. So I want to figure out what's going to multiply to give me my c, my number outside, so 12. Okay, and then what is going to add to give me this here in the middle, so -8. Okay, so thinking of our factors of 12, so let's list our factors of 12. 1 times 12 would give us 12, okay? But if we added those together, 1 and 12, that would not give us 8 or a negative 8, okay? Another factor of 12 is 2 and 6. So let's think about 2 and 6. So if I did 2 plus 6, that would give me a positive 8. However, I know I want it to add here to be a negative 8. So what if I use a negative 2 and a negative 6? Okay, so negative 2 plus negative 6 would give us a negative 8. So that one works. Okay, so now I need to take these factors that I found, okay, and I need to split up this negative 8x. So I would have x squared minus 2x minus 6x plus 12. Okay, so I'm taking that negative 8x, I'm splitting up into negative 2x and negative 6x because that's what I figured out what works. So now I'm going to draw my box. Okay, and then on the inside of my box, I'm going to put those 4 terms. So I'm going to have an x squared, a negative 2x, a negative 6x, and a positive 12. All right, so now I want to see what is going to factor out of my greatest common factor. So looking at these top 2 boxes between x squared and negative 2x, so between these two, my greatest common factor is just going to be 1x. Okay, and then now I want to find my greatest common factor between my bottom 2 boxes, so negative 6x and 12. So my greatest common factor between 6 and 12 is going to be 6. 6 evenly goes into both those numbers. And since this first box right here, since that's a negative number, I know I'm going to need to pull out a negative. Okay, so my greatest common factor is going to be a negative 6. Okay, all right. Now we're going to look at our greatest common factor between these two, so x squared and negative 6x. Again, I can just pull an x out of that. Okay, and then my greatest common factor between negative 2x and 12 is going to be 2. And then again, since this first box is a negative number, I know my factor is going to have to, my greatest common factor is going to have to be negative, okay? So now I just need to write out, let me make some room. Now I just need to write out my factors in factors form. Again, it doesn't matter what order I write them in, so I just have x minus 6 times x minus 2, okay? So that is our answer in factored form. All right, let's take a look at one more example. Okay, so same thing. Let's draw our x. We need to figure out what's going to multiply to give us our c term, so this last term, so negative 15. Don't forget that negative sign. Okay, and then what's going to add? So add to give me that middle term, that b term too. Okay, so let's think of our factors of 15. We can list some factors out. So 1 times 15, that multiplies to give us 15, but we want to think about, is that going to add to give us our 2 here, okay? No, 1 plus 15 would not add to give us 2. So let's think about other numbers that multiply to give us 15. Let's think about 3 and 5, okay? So 3 times 5 would give us 15, but remember we need it, if you look up here, we need it to be a negative 15. Okay, so we need to multiply to be a negative 15. So I know one of my numbers is going to have to be positive and one is going to have to be negative, okay? And so let's use 3 and 5, okay? And since it needs to add to be a positive number, okay, my larger factor is going to have to be positive. So think about this. Negative 3 times 5, that would give me a negative 15. And then negative 3 plus 5, that would add to give me a positive 2. Okay, so now I need to split up this middle term. Okay, so I'd have x squared minus 3x plus 5x minus 15. Okay, so once we split up that middle term, now that we have our 4 terms, we can just draw our box, okay, and put the terms inside of our box. Okay, so I had an x squared, a negative 3x, positive 5x, and a negative 15. Okay, so I need to pull out my greatest common factor. For these top two boxes, x squared and negative 3x, my greatest common factor is just going to be a 1x. Okay, and then between these bottom two boxes here, 5x and negative 15, 5 evenly goes into both 5 and 15, so that's my greatest common factor. Since this first term here, so closest to that greatest common factor, since that's positive, we're just pulling out a positive 5, okay? Now I need to find my greatest common factor between x squared and 5x, so again, I can just pull out an x there. And then I need to find my greatest common factor between these last two, so negative 3x and negative 15. So 3 evenly goes into 3 and 15. Okay, and since this first box is negative, I know my factor needs to be negative. Okay, so now our very last step is we just need to write this in factored form. Okay, so I would have x plus 5 times x minus 3. Okay. All right, so here are two problems that you need to do on your own. Remember, you need to at least attempt both of these and bring them to class tomorrow.